He left me and our children for a younger woman. 3 years later, I ran into them again. And let's just say karma was punctual. For 14 years, I thought I had it all: a stable marriage, a warm home, and 2 wonderful children. Eric and I had built a life from the ground up. We met in our late 20s while working in the same company. He was charming and ambitious, always full of ideas and plans for our future. I fell hard and fast. Within a year, we were engaged, and by the second, we were married. Life moved quickly, but it felt right. We celebrated milestones together, bought our first modest house, and later upgraded to a family home with a yard when our daughter Emma was born. 2 years later came Noah, and I thought our family was complete. Our days were full of laughter, tantrums, birthday parties, and scraped knees. I wasn't just a wife. I was a mother, a planner, a cook, a teacher, a shoulder to cry on, and the glue that held our household together. I gave everything I had to that life. Maybe too much. Eric worked hard, or so I believed. He often stayed late at the office, especially in the last 2 years of our marriage. But I never doubted him. I told myself, he's doing this for us, for the kids. For our future, I was wrong. It started with subtle changes. He got more distant. His smile stopped reaching his eyes. He grew irritable and defensive, snapping at the kids for things that used to make him laugh. He was on his phone constantly, guarding it like it held national secrets. Still, I chalked it up to work stress. I'd seen him burned out before. I never imagined he was pulling away from us. From me. The day everything changed was a Tuesday. I remember it vividly because I was making Emma's favorite, chicken noodle soup with alphabet pasta. I was humming along, ladling broth into bowls, when I heard the front door open. It was early. Eric wasn't due home for another hour. I wiped my hands and called out, "Eric!" What I didn't expect was the sound of high heels clicking across the hardwood floor. I stepped into the living room, and there they were. Eric and a woman I had never seen before in my life. She was tall, poised, and radiated a smug elegance, the kind that didn't need to say she looked down on you because it was written all over her face. Her name, I would soon learn, was Vanessa. She wore this designer coat like she had walked out of a catalog, and her hand rested lightly on Eric's arm like she had every right to be there, in my home. I just stared, frozen. She looked me up and down slowly and smirked. "You weren't exaggerating," she said, her voice like poisoned honey. She really let herself go. Such a shame. She's got decent bone structure. I remember everything about that moment. The smell of the soup, the trembling in my knees, the heat in my cheeks. My husband didn't say a word in my defense. He just stood there like a guilty teenager. "Excuse me?" I finally managed to say. Eric exhaled like I was the one being unreasonable. "Rachel, this is Vanessa," he said calmly. "And I want a divorce." That word, divorce, hit me like a slap. "What about the kids? What about everything we've built?" I whispered. "You'll manage," he said coldly. "I'll handle child support, but Vanessa and I are serious. I brought her here so you'd know I'm not changing my mind." And then, as if tearing apart our lives wasn't enough, he delivered the knockout punch. "You can sleep on the couch tonight or go to your mom's because Vanessa is staying over." I couldn't believe it. My husband of 14 years was throwing me out of my own bedroom for the woman he'd been cheating on me with. It wasn't even heartbreak at that moment. It was fury. Pure, white-hot betrayal. But I refused to fall apart in front of them. I turned, walked upstairs, and started packing, shaking, crying, but determined not to let him see me break. I packed for myself, for Emma and Noah. I moved mechanically, stuffing clothes into bags as tears blurred my vision. When I walked into Emma's room, she looked up from her book. "Mom? What's going on?" I knelt beside her and stroked her hair. "We're going to Grandma's for a little while, sweetheart. Pack a few things, okay?" "But why? Where's Dad?" Noah asked, standing in the doorway. I swallowed hard. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. But we're going to be okay. I promised. They didn't understand. Not fully, but they trusted me. That night I drove through the rain, the the kids asleep in the back seat, and my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. I didn't know how I was going to put our lives back together. All I knew was that I had to. When my mom opened her front door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into her arms as I broke down. The days that followed were a blur. Divorce papers, lawyers, moving, comforting the kids, keeping it together for their sake. I went from being a stay-at-home mom to working 2 part-time jobs. I had no choice. Eric was gone. Completely. Not just from my life, from the kids' lives too. At first, Eric kept his word. The child support payments arrived on time, and though he didn't make an effort to see Emma and Noah, I thought maybe he was giving them space, or giving himself time to adjust to his new life. But by the 6th month, the checks stopped coming. No explanations, no warning, no calls. I tried to contact him, sent emails, left voicemails, nothing. It was like he had vanished, not just from my life, but from the lives of his children. And that kind of abandonment doesn't just break a mother's heart, it shatters it into dust. The worst part was watching Emma and Noah slowly realize that their father wasn't coming back. At first, they would ask me if he was busy. They'd draw pictures for him. Emma even kept a little notebook of things she wanted to tell him the next time they talked. That notebook stayed blank for a year. When Emma stopped asking questions, it wasn't because she got answers, it was because she gave up hope. And Noah, being younger, grew up without expecting much from him at all. I later found out, through an old mutual friend, that Vanessa had pushed Eric to cut ties with his old life. According to them, she thought staying connected to me and the kids was a distraction, and Eric, like a loyal puppy, complied. He gave up everything to please her, but life has a funny way of correcting itself, especially when people build castles on sand. The thing about hitting rock bottom is, there's nowhere to go but up. So I started rebuilding. Not just our finances or our home, but myself. We moved into a modest 2-bedroom home, far from luxurious, but it was ours. No pretenses, no betrayals hidden in the walls, just a clean slate and a promise to my kids, and to myself, that we would be okay. Emma threw herself into art and started painting. I watched her evolve from a quiet, heartbroken girl to a focused, determined young woman. Noah fell in love with robotics. He built little machines that buzzed around the living room, each one more sophisticated than the last. And me? I went back to school, part-time, online courses at first. I got certified in project management, took on more stable work, and slowly built a career I could call my own. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by someone else's last name or decisions. 3 years passed. That pain I once carried like a stone in my chest had dulled into a quiet scar. Life wasn't easy, but it was ours, and I had never felt stronger. Then, one rainy afternoon, everything came full circle. I had just finished a long grocery run, juggling a soaked umbrella and a few stubborn paper bags, when I spotted them, Eric and Vanessa, sitting under the awning of a tiny cafe across the street. At first, I wasn't even sure it was them. They looked different. Not in the glamorous, movie star way they once tried to project, but in the worn-out, faded way that comes from living a life built on delusions. Eric looked tired. His once neatly styled hair was thinning. His shirt was wrinkled and didn't quite fit right anymore. His tie hung limp like it was placed as an afterthought, not with care. Vanessa still wore designer brands, but the details gave her away. Her dress was worn thin at the seams, her expensive handbag was scuffed and peeling, and her posture, once so haughty, now seemed slouched with disappointment. I don't know why I stood there. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, to protect the peace I had worked so hard to rebuild. But another part of me, the part that had carried years of unanswered questions, kept me rooted. And then Eric looked up and saw me. For a second, I saw something flash across his face. Was it guilt? Shock? Regret? He stood so fast he nearly knocked his chair over. "Rachel!" he called out. "Wait!" I hesitated. My groceries were getting wet, my hair was a mess, and I was standing in the middle of a storm. But I couldn't walk away. Not yet. I placed the bags under the overhang of a nearby shop and walked across the street, my heart pounding, not out of fear, but from sheer disbelief. Vanessa's face soured the moment she saw me. She looked away immediately, pretending to check her phone. Her silence spoke volumes. Eric, meanwhile, looked desperate. "Rachel, I'm so sorry," he began, voice cracking. "Can we talk? Please. I need to see the kids. I need to make things right." I looked at him, this man who once meant everything to me, and for the first time I saw a stranger. "Make things right?" I repeated. "You disappeared for over 2 years, Eric. You stopped calling, stopped paying child support. You missed birthdays, dance recitals, Noah's science fair, and now you want to talk? I know I messed up. I do. I didn't know how to fix it. Vanessa and we made some bad decisions." "Oh, don't put that on me," Vanessa suddenly snapped, her mask slipping. "You're the one who lost all that money on your guaranteed investment. Don't act like I forced your hand." "You told me it was a smart move," Eric barked, clearly embarrassed. "You're the one who bought me this," she said, holding up her damaged purse, "instead of saving for rent." They bickered right there, in public, the fantasy they'd built unraveling at the seams. And I just stood there, dry under the awning, watching two people who had destroyed my family destroy each other. It wasn't satisfying the way you might think. It didn't erase the pain or rewrite the past, but it was clarifying. I no longer saw them as the people who had taken something from me. I saw them as what they truly were, broken. And I had survived. Not just survived, thrived. Vanessa stood abruptly, adjusting her dress with a flick of her wrist that tried to look dignified, but failed. The fraying hem and the weariness in her eyes betrayed whatever pride she had left. "I stayed because of the child we had together," she said coldly, barely glancing in Eric's direction. Her voice cut through the rain and silence like a dagger. "But don't think for a second I'm sticking around now. You're on your own, Eric." Just like that, she turned and walked away, heels clicking against wet pavement, back ramrod straight, as though she still had something to prove. She didn't look back once. Eric just stood there, slumped, watching her disappear into the gray drizzle. He didn't call after her. He didn't move. He just sank back into his chair like all the wind had been knocked out of him. And then slowly, he turned back to me. He looked smaller now. Not in height, but in presence. He wasn't the man I had married, not even close. "Rachel, please, let me come by," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Let me talk to Emma and Noah. I miss them. I miss us." United States. That word used to hold so much weight. It used to mean family, love, partnership. Now it felt hollow coming from his lips. I stared at him for a long moment. Not out of hatred, but because I needed to be sure of what I saw. And what I saw was regret. Deep, honest, devastating regret. But regret doesn't heal wounds when it comes years too late. "Give me your number," I said quietly. "If the kids want to talk to you, they'll call. But you're not walking back into my house. Not now, not ever." He flinched, just barely, but it was there. A flicker of pain in his eyes. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled receipt, scribbling his number in shaking handwriting. "Thank you," he said softly. I'd be grateful if they call me." I didn't answer. I just folded the paper and tucked it into my coat pocket without looking at it. Then I picked up my groceries and walked away. As I reached my car and loaded the bags into the trunk, I stood still for a moment, breathing. The rain was still falling, but I barely noticed. Something inside me had shifted. I thought I would feel triumphant seeing them fall apart. I imagined it would feel like justice. But what I felt wasn't triumph. It was peace. I had waited years for Eric to feel the weight of what he'd done, but in that moment I realized I didn't need him to. I had already done the hard part. I had survived the wreckage. I had pulled my children through hell and built something beautiful from the ashes. His regret was no longer my responsibility. That night, I told Emma and Noah about the encounter. I kept it simple, gentle. I didn't want to sway their feelings or poison their hearts. I just said, I ran into your dad today. He wants to talk to you. I have his number if either of you ever want to call. Emma looked down at her sketch pad, quietly processing. Noah just shrugged. Maybe someday, he said, and I nodded. I didn't push them. They'd grown up faster than they should have. They'd lived without answers and figured out how to move on. Whatever decision they made, I would support it. But I wouldn't let Eric bulldoze his way back into their lives like nothing happened. That week, I cleaned out an old drawer and came across a photo album. The early days. Our wedding. Eric holding baby Emma in the hospital. Noah's first birthday. I sat on the floor and flipped through the pages, remembering the woman I used to be. She had been hopeful, maybe naive, but she had loved deeply and given everything she had to her family. And despite how it ended, that woman deserved respect. She wasn't foolish. She was loyal. She wasn't weak. She was devoted. And now, she was wiser. In the weeks that followed, I saw subtle shifts in the kids. Emma's sketches grew more emotional. Noah's robotics projects got more elaborate, more ambitious. There was no call to Eric yet, but I knew they were thinking, processing, healing in their own time. One evening, as we sat at dinner, just the three of us at our cozy kitchen table, Emma looked up and said, "Mom, do you ever miss him?" I paused. It wasn't a question I expected, but I appreciated her courage to ask. "I miss who I thought he was," I said truthfully. "I don't miss the man he became, and I don't miss the way he made us feel." She nodded slowly. Noah, quiet as always, reached for another spoonful of mashed potatoes, but his eyes lingered on me with a thoughtful intensity. We didn't need to say more. The truth was, Eric's absence had hurt us, deeply. But it also forced us to become something stronger. We weren't broken anymore. We were different, sharper, tougher, but also more compassionate, more connected. It turns out, sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you leads to the best version of yourself. Weeks passed, and Eric didn't call. Neither did the kids. The number he gave me sat untouched in the corner of a kitchen drawer, under takeout menus and expired coupons. Every once in a while, I'd catch a glimpse of it when reaching for a pen or a recipe card. I never threw it away, not because I wanted to use it, but because it reminded me of a choice I had made, and a boundary I was finally strong enough to keep. I didn't need to chase him anymore. I didn't need closure from him. I had built that closure myself, quietly, steadily, piece by piece, over years of love and healing with Emma and Noah. One Sunday afternoon, we were driving back from a local craft fair where Emma had displayed her first real art prints. Noah had won second place in a robotics competition the day before. The car was filled with laughter, snacks, and tired joy. I glanced at them in the rearview mirror, Emma with paint still smudged on her fingers, Noah clutching his little trophy like it was made of gold, and I thought, this is it. This is the life I fought for. We got home, unloaded our things, and settled into our familiar routine. The smell of dinner filled the kitchen, the hum of the dishwasher rattled softly in the background, and the kids argued playfully over what movie to watch. I stepped outside for a moment to catch the last bit of sunlight. As I stood there on the porch, arms crossed against the slight breeze, I realized something important. I no longer looked back. I didn't replay that horrible night in my head anymore. I didn't wonder what I could have done differently to keep Eric from leaving. I didn't miss him. What I missed was already back in my life. Love, peace, laughter, safety. The next day I pulled out the crumpled piece of paper with Eric's number on it. I held it between my fingers for a while, letting the past wash over me one final time. Then I walked it to the trash and dropped it in without hesitation. Letting go doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it's a whisper, a deep breath, a quiet, final decision that frees you more than any apology ever could. Some time later, Emma came into my room one evening, her sketch pad in hand. She hesitated in the doorway. "Mom," she said softly, "if I ever decide to call him, you won't be mad, will you?" I set my book aside and looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She was growing into someone strong and thoughtful, someone who had every right to make her own choices. "No, sweetheart, I wouldn't be mad," I said, walking over to her. "I'd be proud of you, no matter what you choose, as long as you protect your heart." She nodded and leaned into my hug. She didn't say whether she would call him, and I didn't ask again. Some wounds never fully disappear, but they fade, replaced by growth, by strength, by joy, the kind you earn the hard way. And joy did return to our lives in small moments that added up. Sunday morning pancakes, snowball fights in the yard, birthday candles blown out with hope. I learned to laugh again, to dance in the kitchen, to fall asleep without that knot in my chest. We became more than survivors. We became a team, a tribe, a family made not by perfection, but by resilience. As for Eric, I heard bits and pieces over time. Vanessa left for good, apparently moving out with their child. He bounced between jobs, tried to start over, but it was no longer my concern. I didn't wish him harm. I just didn't wish for him anymore. One spring morning, years after the divorce, I walked into our backyard and saw Emma and Noah sitting together under the tree they used to play beneath as toddlers. They were older now, but in that moment, I saw them as they had been, the reason I never gave up. Noah looked up and waved me over. "We were just talking about old times," he said with a grin. "Remember when Emma tried to build a birdhouse and nailed it to the fence backward?" Emma rolled her eyes. "Hey, I was like 8. We all laughed, the kind of laughter that comes from deep comfort, from home. And I thought to myself, this is what I saved. This is what I built from ruin. The woman I am today is not the woman who stood in that kitchen on a Tuesday night, soup simmering, life unraveling. She's stronger, braver, wiser, and she knows her worth. Eric didn't break me, he revealed me. And as for that chance encounter years later, it wasn't revenge I found. It was proof that I had risen, not in spite of the betrayal, but because of it.